So, welcome back to the Telco Drift, a podcast exploring tech, telecoms, and other sci-fi tales. Now, today's a great episode as I'm joined by Miguel Carames, Chief Product Officer at Mobilio. So, Miguel, welcome to Drift.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Pablo.
So, as always, when we start an episode, we'd like to start knowing a little bit more about our guest. So, Miguel, can you just share a little bit about sort of your journey within the tech and telco world, and also maybe introduce a little bit about the company as well?
Sure. My name is Miguel Carames. I've been in telecom 26 years, right? So I went to school to do this. So if you add the college years, much longer than this. Started my career in Motorola back in 2000. Spent 9 years there. Started in Madrid, but was sent to Chicago on assignment a few weeks later, and then pretty much spent my entire career in Chicago. Worked on 3G R&D, WiMAX, and then the beginning of 4G LTE, and then in 2009 I moved to Verizon, and I spent 13 years at Verizon, different roles from individual contributor, building the roaming portfolio, all the way through growing through the ranks up to executive director in network planning by the time I left in 2022. And then here at Mobilum, I've been here for 3.5 years. The first 6-7 months, I was running the roaming and security business unit.
Mm-hmm.
And then 3 years ago, I got the chief product officer role. So I'm in charge of our product strategy, capital planning, P&L ownership for the entire business and such. And, as far as Mobilum, so we are a highly diversified company. We're about 1,700 people all over the world. I don't have any of my direct reports in the same continent. So, it goes to show that's, I guess, the new normal. We're a software vendor in the telecom space. We mostly build software-based solutions for MNOs. But increasingly, there are also opportunities in the near adjacent areas like enterprises, MVNOs. MVNOs are a growing area of business for us. Global IoT players, car OEMs, and government and regulators as well. And Mobilium grew through a lot of inorganic acquisitions about 5 years ago. So we have 5 distinct business units, which I'm sure we'll touch during the conversation at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are a few things that I want to touch on based on what you said. And of course, it's great to hear that enterprise is sort of an opportunity that is emerging. But if I take like a step back, so you work both on the vendor side and on the telco side. What would you say is the biggest difference that you see between sort of, building the product and the solution, or maybe more on the commercializing side of things?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and so the roles are very different. In a way, when you are at the MNO side, you are more of an integrator, right? So you have to make buy versus build versus partner type decisions. More often than not, you buy, right? Whether that's like core network functions or your RAN partners or verticalized application providers and so on, and you have a business goal in mind or a set of solutions and products that you want to offer your own customers. And again, that can be consumer, but can be also small and medium business or large enterprises. And you try to choose best in class partners for each of those building blocks that you need, and then integrate them in hopefully something that's value generating, differentiating for the company, and also sticky, right? Obviously, one of the big priorities what you are at the MNO is minimize churn at all costs, right? It's losing a customer and regaining the customer is very expensive. Keeping a customer is much better.
Yeah. That's a great point because it's always the case of like I just want kind of land the customer, because that's the big effort, you know. Once I'm there, then even from a customer perspective, it's always harder to leave. Even if you're really unhappy with the service, it's much easier, to find a way like that. Yeah, I'm gonna just give it another try compared to starting everything anew. And since you're covering sort of a lot of different things within the tech space, first question I would like to ask you is really setting the scene and trying to understand. Okay, you guys are doing lots of different things. You're targeting a lot of different markets. If we look at the trends that are shaping the sectors, what would you say are the main trends? And I'm particularly interested in anything that you would say this has developed over the last, let's say, couple of years. So anything that has changed recently and that as a consequence is forcing a little bit of a broader change maybe in how you guys work and how some of the other people work.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So if I think about the last couple of years, obviously we'll start with the elephant in the room, AI. There's no conversation without AI anymore.
It had to
Uh,
happen, right?
yeah. So at some point it was going to come up in the conversation, but it's a very real trend, right? Like we're at the I guess the iPhone moment with ChatGPT, where it made the technology very real for the end customer, right? Like it's not like AI. AI is nothing new to telecom, right? I've said this in a million presentations, even when I was still at Verizon. There's been a lot of AI in telco for a very long time, right? Because it's nearly impossible to run these networks and these businesses without machine learning and AI tooling and solutions, right? That's just the way it is. The networks are too big, they generate too much data. It was not necessarily Gen AI, right? So that's the innovation that's developed over the last couple of years. But AI, there's been plenty, and that's a trend that nobody can ignore, right? So there is impetus for using the technology to be more efficient, right? And that's probably the most important trend over the last 18 to 24 months has been this renewed focus on innovation and in automation, right? So you have um, pretty much every telco around the world has reduced the task force some more, some less, but they all have less people doing a lot of work, right? And so they need definitely a lot of help with automation to run the networks, run the services, help their customers, identify problems before they impact the end customer, make sure they get resolved, automate all these hundreds of changes that happen in these networks every night, right? Like the miracle of the technology is that so many things are changing all the time, and yet for the most part, we the users really are agnostic, right? All this is transparent to us, other than when it goes bad, right? But for the most part, you don't really know that all this is happening. But that's a big trend. Then on the technology side, we've gone through. So we went through the moment of a lot of excitement with private networks and multi-access edge compute. Then it died out a little bit, right? Like as in, okay, there are thousands of these networks out there, but is there a return or not? There were the examples that everybody was presenting, right? The mines and the smart ports, which are big
Yeah.
installs.
I'm covering in my other life
Okay,
as an
excellent,
analyst
excellent.
private network, so I know the pain of that market quite well.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting thing that I do think there are verticals where it's critical, and I saw it firsthand in my previous life. But maybe not every application is perfect for a private network necessarily. Maybe it need to be a little more, maybe more intentional, more careful. Not like when you have a sledgehammer, it seems like that's the only tool. But for some problems you need something else, right? Like a little
Yeah.
more, maybe more granular. But this Mac is an interesting one because now with Gen AI and this push for keeping the data on net, protecting the access to the data, the concerns about how the large language models, the frontier labs use the information and so on. It looks like it's instill like new life on this. Or like, do you need your own compute? Do you then extend that compute to your customers? Maybe at least on the enterprise side. So it seems to be picking up steam again. That's an interesting trend that we're seeing as well.
And it's interesting, particularly on the Mac side, because what we see now, sort of that idea of edge compute at the edge of the network, AI factory, AI grid, whatever, wants to call it, is Mac 2.0 pretty much, right?
Right.
Mac was quite hyped a few years back. It never really made it mainstream in a sense. But now because of AI, it is definitely people thinking, okay, what should I compute and where, and like the distributed network and the sovereignty angle is definitely quite
Agree.
big. So one way or another, seems that the AI is the big thing that is changing. And something else that you mentioned. So you mentioned that everything is becoming so complex and big that you need AI. So is that sort of the case? So we can expect more and more autonomy in how we manage the network, and you can only achieve that pretty much with AI or ML. Is that sort of the direction that we're going?
Yeah, so I definitely think that's that's a unstoppable trend, right? So and I think it makes logical sense. I think we are probably in most cases a few years out from kind of the what the TM Forum defines as level 5 and so on, right? Like the click and forget. Uh, we might never get there. There is also a point of friction between the technology and the culture of these organizations too, right? Like the fact that you don't want, when you're running these networks and you're responsible for mission critical services for millions of customers, you cannot afford to lose the sense of control. You
Mhm.
have to feel 100% comfortable that if something was to go wrong, you'll be able to root cause it nearly in real time and bring it
Mhm.
back in control. And I think that ultimate vision of you click and forget, like a big red easy button, right? Like they used to have in the commercial, probably is more aspirational, but definitely you are starting to see it in pockets. Like functional areas, maybe parts of the network or the specific services. And I think it's unstoppable and it makes sense, right? Get the machine to do what the machine does best. Use the
Mhm.
technology to help you, like probably bad analogy, but like the Waymo or the like whatever Tesla calls the self-driving mode.
Mhm.
Right? The technology is there. Why not use it? You still have human in the loop, in the example of Tesla, and you will need it for a while. But I'm a big believer that we'll see incremental progress towards many of these processes. Parts of the network will be very highly automated, and yeah, for that you need the capabilities that AI provides.
And so what I found it fascinating in a sense is that if you look at sort of, kind of branching out a little bit, some sci-fi stories or whatever we want, and you have sort of worlds that are very much polarized in a sense with very advanced things at the same time is very kind of retro things. And when you're talking about, you were just talking about the autonomous driving, I never think about it because I live in Italy and that's really not a thing. But thinking about the US, that is something that, more large steps, it is happening. And I can imagine also with the network, it's going to be, some people really going full autonomous or as close as they can, very automated, and others going to be kind of at a different stage. So quite a complex environment, definitely. And particularly when, different networks, different autonomies will need to collaborate in one way or another. But one thing that you didn't mention directly, I mean, you mentioned private networks, you mentioned Mac, and those are some flavors, if you want, out of the 5G dream, opportunity, whatever. What's your take on it? Is 5G done, delivered what it was meant to do? Is it too early to kind of call it a day on success or failure, or what's happening there for you?
Yeah, this is a very tough one. And so if you look at the IMT 2020 definition, or even I remember we used to talk about the currencies of 5G, right? Like all the value that it was going to deliver, and also in many different dimensions. So there was definitely the throughput, but there was the ultra reliable low latency. There was like the high density of devices and so on. And you step back, I mean, I think we need to admit that we have not delivered all that value as
Mhm.
a as an industry overall, right? Like this is not blaming anybody, but I don't think the value has been fully delivered. Um, I think it's honestly the case where the moment we had the two evolution paths, right, the non-standalone and the standalone, and the non-standalone was easier for obvious reasons, right, much
Mhm.
faster to market. You could reuse more of the network that you had already built for 4G with some minor changes here and there. Obviously, a lot of work on the radio side, but on the core you could pretty much reuse the entire core and so on. It made it hard for the industry to convince themselves that the move to SA was that critical because you already had some of the value delivered, right? Like the additional spectrum could be put to use. You already had the icon for the end customer. You had better throughput. So we lost some momentum there, and I think it's
Mhm.
the SA looked harder and harder, right? Like to get there. Um, we will see. I think now as more and more networks deploy SA, some of the promise can be unleashed, right? Like slicing and so on. And maybe we'll see a second wave of life behind 5G and 5G's advanced type capabilities. But it's a really tough question because right now, if you look at the financials, there was a lot of investment made and arguably very little return, right? Because customers were
Yeah.
already paying. I mean, I live here in the US, so all the customers have unlimited plans as is, right? So you have different tiers of unlimited plans with different caps after which you'll be throttled and so on, or maybe different resolution for your video and stuff, but it's
Mhm.
already unlimited, right? And it's hard to explain to the customer at times that you are paying more for more unlimited, right? When they feel like what they have is good enough, right? So finding that killer app is still a little elusive for 5G. Uh, but I think it's critical because otherwise, how do we get to 6G, right? Without some value being generated on 5G. It's a tough one for the
And,
industry.
and for me, that is a little bit of the challenge because let's say you don't have 6G, right? So you only have 5G, and you have time to make it work. Whatever, takes like 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, because that is sort of as good as it gets for now. And and then you can really put your best brain to decide how to monetize it. But because 6G is coming sooner rather than later, and I think a lot of the attention is kind of shifting, at least the hype in a sense, just like, okay, 5G done and dusted, but 6G is going to be this and that and everything. And I think that from a pure monetization point of view, that is a little bit detrimental because people are just saying, oh no, we need to focus on the newer thing. Is that the right strategy? No. Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, 6G both excites me and worries me, right, a lot
Mhm.
because so obviously for the industry overall, these 10-year cycles are very important, right? Like the major generational upgrade cycles are key to fund the R&D work that gets done and so on. But it maybe for the first time in my career, it feels a little bit early. Right? It feels like it got here before we really took full advantage of what we built in 5G, right? So it's going to be interesting the next couple of years. I mean, obviously, right now is not the specs are not really implementable yet. So we'll see when we get there in 2028 and then closer to 2030 where things are, and then how much of the reusability of the ready-made investment in 5G is a factor in those specs. It's going to be very interesting, actually, very interesting. I'm wondering.
Yeah, definitely. For like a techie person like yourself, it must be like quite cool to see what's happening, what's not going to happen. When I'm looking sort of from a business perspective, I'm or strategic if you want. I'm always wondering is like if let's say you're the first telco starts pushing some 6G out, whether it does a lot or not, yet to be seen, right? But is that gonna force again everyone to rush into 6G because someone is doing it, kind of before it's fully cooked? So that's gonna be interesting to see. But gonna have to wait a few years, I guess.
That's right. We'll talk again in 2028.
But if we start, kind of go back to nowadays, and so you have AI, you have 5G in one form or the other. You have telcos are building this massive network, complex network, and I always hear people saying that telcos have a lot of data, what is like their own data from the network, data from customers, and that one of the bottleneck possibly for telcos struggling a little bit in some of the growth area was in the fact that they hadn't really been able to capitalize on the data that they have. Is that the case? Do telcos really have that much data, and could they do more with what they have? What's your take?
So this is very interesting, and I'll mention a conference that I attended a couple of weeks ago with the Rocco guys. So telcos do have a gold mine of data, right? Because that's your main point of engagement for your digital life. Pretty much for all of, definitely for the younger generations. I look at my kids, and their laptop is an afterthought. It's something that you use for school. The phone is the primary means of engagement,
Yeah.
right, for everything digital. So they do have a lot of data. They are very constrained by what regulation allows them to do. And in a way, if you look at the market in 2026, it's quite interesting how many limitations are there for the telcos and how few are there for the over-the-top providers, right? And I know the argument is always going to be, well, many of these over-the-tops are providing the service for free, and the moment you accept the terms and conditions, you are giving all the rights for them to productize your data and whatnot. But the reality is a very uneven playing field, right? When it gets to
Mhm.
what one part of the market can do versus the other. And I think that's in a way, and this is where I wanted to go back to that conference that I was mentioning. It was a very interesting conversation that followed a hackathon. So a few vendors showing some solutions on APIs and monetization and so on. And then there were a lot of questions on privacy and regulation. And this was a very global audience. So you got to see kind of the differences in the different market, but the underlying commonality that was coming very clearly across is every MNO that was represented was very concerned about getting in trouble from a privacy perspective, right?
Mhm.
And then kind of the very philosophical question that followed was, well, are we as an industry maybe uh, taking it too far, like by being worried and trying to do the right thing? Maybe we're limiting ourselves versus, pretty much in every market there is an opt-in, set of rules and regulations that apply. So if you can create the trust with your customers to go to this opt-in and make the value feel uh, clear for the customer as well. What's in it for me? What do I get for if I give this information? Then could we unleash the opportunities again as an industry, right? And I think it's something that we really need to think about very carefully, because that's where there is some more opportunity. If the customer is not going to pay more for more unlimited because they already feel they get everything that they need, then how else can you get the incremental revenue that allows you to keep investing in these networks? Because you cannot stand still. That's a given. You need to keep putting more spectrum. You need to keep upgrading your network. Every operator will tell you the same thing. That you can deploy as much capacity as you want in the network, and you know a month later, 2 months later, you're already at capacity again because everybody's using the devices more and more. So that need doesn't go away. So how do we make the customer feel that this is not they are being abused, but this is the way that the telcos have to give them more services without charging more for it directly, right? And I think that's where the opportunity lies. Not a simple problem. Otherwise, I would be retired by now. But I think it's one that we gotta tackle as an industry.
Yeah, and it makes sense. It's definitely like a larger problem, and I think the mindset, as you were mentioning, maybe the tech industry becomes a little bit too conservative in a way compared to some of the other guys that sort of they do something and then don't ask for permission but ask for forgiveness type of thing, right? And
Correct.
sometimes, I'm not saying every time, but sometimes they can really help. again, opening up those new opportunities, and then because of new opportunities, you have a better chance of shaping the market and shaping the regulation that is coming.
Yeah.
But again, jumping around a little bit, we mentioned AI, and I think this is quite connected with all the data that the telcos have and everything that's happening. Where do you see the biggest impact for AI within the sort of the telecom industry?
Yeah. So, I mean, we see, so right now, I guess you can break it into value for, internal use, and then value facing the customer. So in the areas where we play on the internal use, we see a lot of efficiencies, right? So if we look at the some of the products that we build and solutions we provide, like for example on the fraud management or the revenue assurance side, uh, we already have the product out with Gen AI capabilities, and it's all about explainability, right? So there is not just listen, this particular uh, MSISDN or IMSI, it has crossed some thresholds, so you should really look into it. The analyst gets the verdict from our agent already, right? So this with a very high level of confidence. It's a fraud case. It's a fraud of this scenario. This is all the evidence pack that we create that
Mhm.
supports that something should be done about that particular line. And this is what we suggest gets done next. Today, still human in the loop, right? So the analyst to review and agree and take the action. For some of these cases, like the 80-20 rule, right? So many of them will be self-explanatory. You have maximum confidence that the action can be automated, so you could do the blocking, throttling, canceling the account on an automatic basis with very limited risk. There'll be some that you'll still want a human to confirm and maybe help improve the logic as well, right? So they'll have an opportunity to say, yeah, I agree with the analysis, or no, maybe you understated this particular signature, and this one is more important for this particular type of fraud. So we see that's a use case already in production. We've seen another one that also already brought out commercially, which is on the testing side of the house, where we have these products that are very technical, right? So it's a solution built for engineers by engineers, uh, extremely flexible, extremely powerful. You can really simulate and emulate anything you could possibly want to on a global basis, right? And I was a customer of the solution, and I'm an engineer, so I really like that flexibility. But now, when you fast forward 10 years later, many of the power users of this system are no longer engineers, are business analysts, are roaming managers that just want to see, what's the quality that their customers enjoy when they travel to a particular network in a particular country, right? And so
Mhm.
now they don't necessarily want to engage with this very technical platform. And so we have like a natural language based bot interface that allows them to do feature discovery, pull reports from the platform. In another few months, get root cause automation as well. So when they are running their testing and something failed, they'll be able to tell what failed, what to do next, what actions to follow, and so on. And so that's the second area of efficiency for us. We want to make some of the products that we already have out there easier for more people to use at the customer side. Right? So those are a lot about efficiencies. And then when we look at products for the end customer, there are some solutions that we've done with a partner tackling the small and medium business. Which is, if you are a small flower shop and you have your website where you can publish your information, also get queries from customers and maybe orders as well. We can very easily help that flower shop create their own agent, right? That then
Mhm.
would be integrated into the platform. They don't need to be super technical. They don't need to learn, some of the frontier model APIs and so on. In an hour they are up and running, right? So that we
Mhm.
see that as a opportunity again for these segments. Obviously, if you are a large enterprise, chances are by now you already have your own AI team and so on, so maybe less applicable. But for small and medium business, we see that they want to participate in the trend. They might not have the capabilities, and then we see a lot on the customer facing scam and spam protection, right? So
Mm.
I'm sure you get a number of calls that you don't want to get, that you just ignore.
Yeah. I
And
think that's everyone's most annoying thing about the smartphone right now, all the scam calls. And some are really good, to be honest.
they are very good. And so it becomes harder and harder to detect them and prevent them, which is why I think we feel very strong that there are Gen AI based offerings that can be added both for text and voice and data as well to help protect customers, and those could be revenue generating, right? So it's not only uh, an efficiency thing, but if you were able to trust your the voice channel again, or you were able to protect your elderly parents or your kids, would you pay for it as a customer, right? And I think the answer in many markets is going to be yes.
Yeah, I would definitely think so. It's like kind of making life easier, right? And that's a big problem. But a quick question on, so you mentioned your solution helping create an agent for like say small flower shop. Would that be sold through a telco, I would imagine, or would you go sort of
Yeah, so this
directly with the telco?
in our case, we always it's a partnership with the telco. So the telco sells to the, and then after that the model can be a rev share. But yeah, we it's through the telco. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because again, like when you're thinking about as a small business, their their knowledge of IT is probably limited. Their knowledge of AI even less so, and maybe someone that is not particularly young, right? So definitely, it does need to have that easier
For
way
them,
into
some
the
of these
world.
solutions are like if you don't respond or don't respond on time or don't send the proposal on time, it's an opportunity gone, right? There
Yeah.
are plenty of flower shops, so somebody else will pick the business. So I think the motivation is high. But yeah, to your point, it's not like they have IT teams lying around. So making it simple for them is a big thing.
And then the other thing that you mentioned that sort of I found very interesting. So you were mentioning about sort of the fact that now not only engineers but also broader set of people may be using the data for business purposes. So in a sense, there is the democratization, if you want, of what used to be a traditionally extremely complex environment. And I found that fascinating because it kind of shows that because of these new tools, then it becomes easier for people that probably would understand, what was happening 10 years ago, but now they have the opportunity to interface in a different way and then can use the data for their own, benefits, KPIs, new products. And I think that's sort of the way forward. But kind of connected to this, and we sort of talked a little bit about it, but just wanted to try to get a clear answer. Ever going through autonomy, is there an ideal scenario in terms of how much the human element you would like, you expect to see remaining in the loop versus how much? Is that sort of a gold standard, let's say, that the industry has? Because I know that everyone says full automation and everything, but we already discussed likely not going to happen. So what are you talking about? I don't know, maybe 1% human involvement, or does it even make sense to think in that way?
So to be honest with you, I think this is an evolving situation still. I
Hmm.
think there'll be parts of the network and specific services where you'll be able to get to, like high 90s, mid 90s automation, because they are a lot more deterministic, a lot less can go wrong that you haven't been able to predict and so on. But there'll be other things where, like if I think it's the network as the pyramid with, at the bottom you have the highly distributed, right, like RAN and edge data centers, and then you have your edge core and then your centralized core. The higher up you get, the the higher the impact of something going wrong, right? Like in that it can really show on a nationwide basis. So those are the areas where probably you need to be hyper careful,
Hmm.
even when you automate, even when you allow the machine to make most of the decisions. You might not feel comfortable with all the decisions,
Okay.
right? As in, if if it's something simple like, okay, this particular, say it's a Kubernetes based deployment already, and one instance is approaching capacity, and you've defined your orchestration such that in that case you can create a new instance and recreate the connectivity and so on. Maybe you feel comfortable with that. But if you are in a different scenario in which the orchestrator is saying, well, this particular network function instance doesn't seem to be healthy, and the recommendation is to reboot it or kill it and instantiate a new one, you probably want a human to validate, at least at this stage, just
Mhm.
because the stakes are too high, right, at that point.
Okay.
So I think that's what I see. It's you probably, and when you see some of the practical use cases that the TM Forum presents, you see the different MNOs targeting service areas, right, or a particular product. And I think that makes sense, right? Experiment, learn, decide if that applies to other areas, and then
Mhm.
deploy to similar parts of the network.
So, and a bit of a side question, but then is so the responsibility, where does it lie? So if I have an automated software and it gives me wrong recommendation, it and me as a customer, do I assume that the responsibility is from the software side or how?
So this is a very philosophical problem at the end of the day. So I think the operator runs the network, right?
Mhm.
One way or another. So they, even in the extreme, you'll still have operations teams. They will be responsible for building the automation, deciding what level they feel comfortable with, and that's where the responsibility lies at the end of the day. This is a little bit of the internal friction they still have, right?
Mhm.
If the goal is to drive a lot of automation, there's always going to be risk in the early days, right? And this is one of the
Yeah.
things I always remember early on. So this would have been probably about 10 years ago. We had an internal conference at my previous employer, and they brought some people from what's now called Meta, right, from Facebook. And they were sharing kind of how they run their network. And it was fascinating, right, for us, because it was so different and it's much smaller teams, much more software oriented. But it came with this very deep belief of calculated risks. Calculated risk
Okay.
being very different from risk free, right? That's in, yeah, every
Yeah. Yeah.
once in a while, things do go wrong, right? And at that point, you might scramble some, but without taking the calculated risk, you'll never get. If you want to be 100% safe and have kind of the same modus operandi we used to have, where somebody writes a mob and then three people reviewed it, and then somebody goes and implement it. It's not like that didn't cause problems too, right? Like you can fat finger command, or you missed a precondition or whatever. So these mistakes can happen, but I think it's that acknowledging that you are taking some risk. You're going to make some mistakes along the way, but that's a unavoidable part of the journey to get to that automation that you want to, because that's how you learn too, right? And nobody likes the mistake when it happens, but how do you do it otherwise?
Yeah, and yeah, and that is pretty much sort of the way that we learn anyways. Like you cannot learn anything without making some mistakes. Of course, easier said if the mistake is trivial, much harder if it's like a nationwide network and something
Correct,
goes down.
correct.
But so the same principle, let's put it this way. So it seems we're running, as always, like around a little bit longer than expected, but just a couple of quick last questions. First one is that, okay, go back to the beginning. Your company is doing a lot of different things, exactly on the roaming side of things. I also saw you wrote a blog on the D2D opportunity. You mentioned some private networks. Where do you see the low hanging fruit for you with all the AI that is happening? Which segment of the market you think, okay, that's gonna be the faster
So
one
to
for
be
me?
honest, we see it across all the. So we have 5 business units, right? So
Mhm.
roaming solutions. We have risk, revenue assurance, financial assurance. We have testing and service assurance. have DPI and analytics, and we have security solutions, which for us is signaling firewall, SMS and voice firewall. All five have opportunity when it gets to adding Gen AI capabilities and
Okay.
making the solution. You use the democratization of the data, and that's a big one that we see. The there is the Gen AI component, and there is the being easy to integrate into Gen AI, right? And I think we have to play on both, right? We have to be platforms that are easy for our customers to integrate into whatever their vision is, right? And hopefully we can help them there. But if they decide to go with somebody else and our solutions are data producers, then that's okay too, right? Like you can win every single opportunity. And then where we see kind of growth potential for us is combining all these discrete products that we have into solutions, right? Because these are very distinct areas, so like very technical to very business oriented, and we're spending quite a bit of time and effort in assembling those into solutions that provide value to, like deploy once and solve for many use cases, kind of being the philosophy. And
Yeah.
I think that's I don't know, that's a low hanging fruit. There is less and less low hanging fruit. Most is being picked already, right? So you need to climb a little bit, but I think that's where we have an opportunity as a company.
Okay, but it seems quite very, very positive anyways. It seems that sort of this, again, the trend that we're discussing, expansion of AI, the complexity of the network is also kind of bringing all together. So very good to see a lot of momentum there. And then literally changing completely topic, but the last question, because I'm trying to, there are lots of podcasts, so trying to be slightly different. Let's be honest there. Um, do you have any recommendation within the world of sci-fi? And I can definitely see a couple of gadgets on your wall that would indicate any book, TV series, movie. What do you think the audience should be keeping in mind, having a read a look?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I have to say I got more into sci-fi stuff when my kids got into it. I would say so. I haven't watched Mandalorian yet, so that's in the to do. One TV show that I did like a lot, and I saw the first season and I thought it was okay, but I really like the second season. Is the Fallout on
Oh,
Amazon Prime, and it's
yeah.
based on a video game. And at times a little over the top. I was watching it on a plane to Europe, and at times I was a little bit worried with the person sitting next to me. So some of the episodes can be a little bit gory, and but I thought it was really nicely done. The second season was very good, so that's probably the one that I would say. And then I'm excited about Dune 3 when it comes out. So I thought
Mhm.
Dune 2 was really really nice. Didn't care for Dune 1 so much. Dune 2 I thought was very good, so I'm excited about Dune 3. So that's one that
Oh,
I'm looking
really?
forward.
I thought the one was also quite good. I also remember the older movie, doing, I don't know, from the 80s, 70s. That was like slightly different in terms of special effects and everything, but a good one. And Fallout, yeah, great video games. And I really like the series as well. Definitely a little bit on the gory side, so probably not for for everyone's. But I thought particularly because it's based on a video game, it was really entertaining. Like, because sometimes when something's based on a video games, it may be a little bit skinny, plot wise.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is that issue, but yeah, definitely good recommendation. And I think, yeah, on this point we can probably close the podcast. So Miguel, thank you very much for your insights. Really appreciate you taking the time to join me on the show. And for everyone listening, thanks again. And feel free to comment, share, and discuss with others. And talk next time.
Thanks, Pablo. Yeah, appreciate it.